10.1 Plan Communications Management. Plan Communications Management is a process of developing an appropriate approach and plan for project communications activities based on the information needs of each stakeholder or group, available organisational assets and the needs of the project. The key benefit of this process is a documented approach to effectively and efficiently engage the stakeholders by presenting relevant information in a timely manner. This process is performed periodically throughout the project as required. An effective communications management plan that recognises the diverse information needs of the project stakeholders is developed early in the project lifecycle. It should be reviewed regularly and modified when necessary, when the stakeholder community changes or at the start of each new project phase. This is from PMBOK Guide, page 366. If you're wondering when you should begin to plan communications on your project, you're already too late. It is one of the earliest things you should do. The purpose of your project is to deliver outcomes to the business that satisfy the key stakeholders. But if you aren't talking to them, it's not going to happen. Every day that you work without communicating is a day that you risk doing something incorrectly. And one of the worst things you can do is to assume that you know what the stakeholders want. The reason is that one of the worst things you can argue that you have documents such as your project charter which tells you what they want, but the truth of the matter is that there's a high likelihood that at this stage the stakeholders don't know what they want. Every project is unique. Every project is a learning experience for all involved, and even if the stakeholders have signed the charter in blood and sworn oaths that they will not change their mind, they will change their minds week by week. And if you're not tapping into this, you will miss out. The best time to plan communications management is when you're performing stakeholder identification and while you're still in the early stages of project management plan development. Many countries now have records management laws, and you need to take those into consideration. If your project spans several countries, then you'll have to allow for the laws of each country. And in the US and Australia, for example, there are different laws in each state. The PMBOK Guide says on page 367, while all projects share the need to communicate project information, the information needs and methods of distribution may vary widely. In addition, the methods of storage, retrieval and ultimate disposition of the project information will be considered and documented during this process. Creating a communications plan is not a once-off activity. The communications plan should be used frequently and continually revised to ensure it's up to date and accurate. Please keep checking your communication plan and keep it up to date. Plan communications management inputs. Input number 1, project charter. The project charter identifies a key stakeholder list. It may also contain information about the roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders, but at any rate it gives you a good starting point. Input number 2, project management plan. The project management plan components include resource management plan. This provides guidance on how the team resources will be categorised, allocated, managed and released. Team members and groups may have communications requirements that should be identified in a communications management plan. Stakeholder engagement plan. This identifies the management strategies required to effectively manage stakeholders. Such strategies are then often fulfilled via communications. Input number 3, project documents. Project documents that can be considered as inputs for this process include requirements documentation. This can include project stakeholder communications, and this can give you clues as to some of the other stakeholders and what their interests are in the project. Stakeholder register is used to plan communications activities with stakeholders. Input number 4, enterprise environmental factors. The enterprise environmental factors that can influence the plan communications management process include organisational structure, political climate and governance framework. Personnel administration policies. For example, can you contact someone directly or must you go through their personal assistant? Do you keep people updated even when they're off-site, and so on. Stakeholder risk thresholds. In the exam, this is also called as risk appetite. How much risk can someone accept before they start having nightmares? Or maybe we'll keep the risks a little lower. Establish communication channels, tools and systems. It makes sense to use what you already have, and this can also include committees such as steering committees, business user groups, business advisor groups and project control groups. Each of these has a secretariat which can assist with dissemination of knowledge, global, regional or local trends, practices or habits, and geographic distribution of facilities and resources. Input number 5, organisational process assets. This would include organisational policies and procedures for social media, ethics and security. Most organisations do not allow social media, others allow it, but have strict rules around its use. It also may be possible that someone may illegally access a channel or a mobile device and gain access to organisational information. Organisational policies and procedures for issue, risk, change and data management. Organisational communication requirements. Standardised guidelines for development, exchange, storage and retrieval of information. This would also include information regarding record storage legislation, historical information and lessons learned repository, and stakeholder and communications data and information from previous projects. This is not the same as lessons learned, this is the actual communications, so you can see how people have interacted, responded and reacted. Planned communications management tools and techniques. Tools and techniques. Number 1, expert judgment. Expertise should be considered from individuals or groups with specialised knowledge or training in the following topics. Politics and power structures in the organisation. Some people want your project to succeed, others unfortunately will want it to fail. You need to find out who is against your project and why, and try to win them over from the dark side. Environmental and culture of the organisation and the other customer organisations, because the customers are stakeholders too. Organisational change management approach and practices. Industry or type of project deliverables. Organisational communication technologies. Organisational policies and procedures regarding legal requirements of corporate communications. Organisational policies and procedures regarding security, and stakeholders including customers or sponsors. Tools and techniques. Number 2, communication requirements analysis. Analysis of communication requirements determines the information needs of the project stakeholders. These requirements are defined by combining the type and format of information needed with the analysis of the value of that information. Sources of information typically used to identify and define project communication requirements would include stakeholder information and communications requirements from within the stakeholder register and stakeholder engagement plan. Number of potential communication channels or paths, including one-to-one, one-to-many or many-to-many communications. Organisational charts, so that you can see who might need communicating with and what the existing lines of communication are, and the areas they work will give you further clues to the information that they need. Note that simply asking people the information that they want, where, why and when, is a guide, but far from definitive. Many people don't really know what they need or even what's available. Some will ask for information they don't need just because it makes them feel important, or they're just nosy people. And you need to be especially careful of information that goes outside the organisation. Project, organisation and stakeholder responsibility, relationships and interdependencies. The development approach. Disciplines, departments and specialties involved in the project. Logistics of how many people will be involved in the project and at which locations. Internal information needs, for example, when communicating within organisations. External information needs, e.g. when communicating with the media, public or contractors. Most organisations have media departments, and the control of communications outside the organisation are controlled by them, and also legal requirements. Tools and techniques. Number 3, communication technology. The methods used to transfer information among project stakeholders may vary significantly. Common methods used for information exchange and collaboration include conversations, meetings, written documents, databases, social media and websites. Factors that could affect the choice of communication technology include urgency of the need for communication, The urgency, frequency and format of the information to be communicated may vary from project to project and also within different phases of the project. Availability and reliability of the technology. The technology that is required for distribution of project management artifacts should be compatible, available and accessible for all stakeholders throughout the project. Ease of use. Use of communication technologies should be suitable for the project participants. If you use, for example, Skype, WhatsApp, Zoom, Facebook and Twitter and so on every day, they will seem intuitively obvious. But to other people, especially those who are novices, they may be downright scary. One way around this is to provide training in the technology and then ensure that you create a non-threatening environment, otherwise you could be creating communication barriers. The project environment. Whether the team will meet and operate on a face-to-face basis or in a virtual environment, whether they will be located in one or multiple time zones, whether they will use multiple languages for communication, and finally whether there are other project environmental factors such as the various aspects of culture which may constrain the efficiency of the communication. For example, you may have to allow for prayer times or cultural festivals. The sensitivity and confidentiality of the information. Some aspects we consider are whether information to be communicated is sensitive or confidential. If so, additional security measures may be redacted. On printed materials, for example, you could redact the information by using a black pen to stroke out confidential words or people's names. Social media policies for employees to ensure appropriate behaviour, security and the protection of proprietary information. This can be a real problem if the organisation can be clearly identified on the employee's media account, because comments made by the employee will be taken as advice from the organisation and therefore the organisation could be legally responsible for it. For example, a junior team member mishears a conversation between the other team members that 80% of the income generated by the new product will come from 20% of their customers. The junior employee then posts on the company social media site that the first 80 customers will receive a 20% discount. If the customers believe this is official advice from the organisation, you have a serious problem. Tools and techniques number 4, communication models. The models can represent the communications process in its most basic linear form, i.e. sender and receiver. In a more interactive form that encompasses the additional element of feedback, sender, receiver and feedback, or in a more complex model that incorporates the human elements of the sender or receivers and attempts to show the complexity of any communication that involves people. For the exam, you'll need to understand the more complex model, of course, but you need to understand the simple one first and then we can build upon it. The simple basic sender-receiver communication model. This model describes communication as a process and consists of two parties defined as the sender and the receiver. This model is concerned with ensuring that the message is delivered rather than understood. What does this mean? I'll give you an example. Several years ago in a PMP classroom course I was presenting, one of the students was an army officer. I was talking about communication and the importance of feedback and ensuring that the message had been understood. The army officer put his hand up and said, "That's exactly what we do in the army. It's standard practice." It's always great to have someone in the class who actually puts practice principles into action because it adds more weight to what you're saying. So I asked him how they did it. He said, "It's very simple. When I give an order, the soldier has to feed it back to me word for word, and then I know it's been understood. If they get it wrong, I repeat the instruction and they feed it back again and again until they've got it right." I said that unfortunately that's not feedback, it is repetition. Simply repeating the exact message simply shows that they've heard it, but there's no way to tell if they've understood it. A parrot can repeat phrases, but they obviously don't understand a single word of it. But let's get back to our simple communication model. It is 3 parts. Step 1 is encode. The message is encoded into symbols such as text, sound or electromagnetic waves for radio, electrical signals for landline phones, computers and faxes, or light if you're using fibre network cables or some other medium for transmitting or sending a message. Step 2, transmit. The message is sent via a communication channel such as air, as in the case of speech, or air in the case of sound from a radio loudspeaker, or cables for computer networks. The transmission of this message may be compromised by various physical factors such as unfamiliar technology or inadequate infrastructure. Noise and other factors may be present and contribute to loss of information in transmission and or reception of the message. Before we move on, we need to understand what noise means. Noise can be a sound, but a sound is just one type of noise. A noise is anything that detracts from receiving the message. If you're talking with someone and there's loud traffic nearby or a jet plane flies overhead, then these can distract from the message. But even if everything is quiet and sunlight is reflecting from a window, you have a toothache, you're hungry, or you can see a large pimple on the speaker's nose, many other things that can detract from the message, these are also classed as noise. Step 3, decode. The data received is translated by the receiver back into a form useful and understandable by the receiver. Let's go through an example. Suppose I'm talking to you in an office. I don't actually think in English. I think in English, but in fact the experts tell us that everyone has an internal thought language. Ideas just pop into your mind. You know what it means without actually hearing an explanation of it in English words, and you have to then go through a process subconsciously to translate your thought language into English words so that you can speak them out, and this is called encoding. When I speak the words, the communication channel, also called the medium, is air, and the words travel through the air to your ears. This is transmission. You hear the words, but in order to understand them, your mind must subconsciously translate them back into your internal thought language. Your internal thought language will be different from mine. Only you can understand it. The process of translating words into your thought language is called encoding. If one computer sends a message to another computer, the process is the same. The sending computer will encode the message into electrical signals using a device called a modulator. The channel could be metal cable, fiber cable, or air in the case of wireless. The encoded or modulated signal will be transmitted to the second computer. And electrical interference in a channel would be an example of noise. The second computer can't understand the signals directly. It has to decode them using a demodulator. And you can see it's the same process as the example of people talking. In computers, the encoding and decoding, as I said, are carried out in a modulator and a demodulator. These two functions are usually carried out by a single device called a modulator-demodulator, but normally abbreviated to a more familiar name, a modem. That was a simple communications model. Now we will examine an interactive communication model. This model also describes communication as a process consisting of two parties, the sender and the receiver, but recognises the need to ensure that the message has been understood. In this model, noise includes any interference or barriers that might compromise the understanding of the message, such as distraction of the receiver, variations in the perception of the receivers, or lack of appropriate knowledge or interest. The additional steps in an interactive communication model are acknowledge. Upon receipt of a message, the receiver might signal, acknowledge, receipt of the message. But this does not necessarily mean an agreement with or comprehension of the message, merely that it has been physically received. Then you have feedback response. When the feedback message has been encoded and understood, the receiver encodes thoughts and ideas from the message in the terms of speech, then transmits this message back to the original sender. If the sender perceives that the feedback matches the original message, the communication has been successful. In communication between people, feedback can be achieved through active listening. What's active listening? It means not just paying full attention to the speaker, but being seen to be paying full attention. Imagine you're speaking to me, I listen for a few minutes, but then I seem to be reading posters on the wall and checking messages on my phone. So that is active non-listening. With active listening, you should be giving non-verbal feedback, such as leaning forward, nodding in agreement, smiling, keeping eye contact, making noises, signalling agreement and not fidgeting. The speaker should then feel more relaxed and confident that the message is getting through. Please note that active listening does not mean second guessing in finishing the other person's sentences. Also, I should point out some people actually feel uncomfortable with eye contact. If you sense that somebody is uncomfortable with the eye contact, then of course you don't do that part of it. It's important to remember for the exam that the sender is responsible for choosing the medium of the transmission, e.g. talking, emailing, etc. For example, I'm communicating this training course, so I've chosen this video medium. Ensuring that the message is communicated clearly and completely, and confirming the message is correctly interpreted. The receiver is responsible for ensuring that the entire message is received and acknowledging or responding appropriately. And both parties need to be aware of noise and other communication barriers, including differences of culture or language. Differences in communication styles can arise from differences in working methods, age and nationality, professional discipline, ethnicity, race, gender and so on. People from different cultures communicate using different languages, e.g. technical design documents, different styles, and expect different processes and protocols. The communication model shown in figure 10.4 represents the idea that the message itself and how it is transmitted and influenced by the sender's current emotional state, knowledge, background, personality, culture and biases. Similarly, the receiver's emotional state, knowledge, background, personality, culture and biases will influence how the message is received and interpreted and will contribute to the barriers or noise. The communication model and its enhancements can assist in developing communication strategies and plans for person-to-person or even small group to small group communications. It's not useful for other communication artifacts such as emails, broadcast messages or social media. Chosen techniques number 5, communication methods. There are several communication methods that can be used to share information among project stakeholders. These methods are broadly classified as followed: interactive communication between two or more parties performing a multidirectional exchange of information in real time. It employs communication artifacts such as meetings, phone calls, instant messaging, some forms of social media, chat rooms and video conferencing. It does not include email, online forums and similar because these are usually delayed communication and not real time. Also, push communication. This is analogous with setting up home delivery for a newspaper. Whenever the newspaper is ready, someone will cycle or drive past your house and throw a newspaper at it and probably miss it. Send or distribute it directly to specific recipients who need to receive the information. This ensures that information is distributed but does not ensure that it's actually reached or is understood by the intended audience, such as the newspaper gets lost or stolen by a dog or by your next door neighbour. Push communication artifacts include letters, memos, reports, emails, faxes, voice emails, blogs and press releases. Pull communications. This is so called because it is analogous with pulling a book from a shelf. You get it only if and when you want it, and you have to actually reach out for it. If you don't reach out for it, the book will remain on the shelf. Used for large complex information sets or for large audiences and requires the recipients to access content at their own discretion, subject to security procedures. These methods include web portals, internet sites, e-learning, lessons learned databases or knowledge repositories. Different approaches should be applied to meet the needs of the major forms of communications defined in the Communications Management Plan. Interpersonal communication. Information is exchanged between individuals, usually face-to-face. Small group communication occurs within groups of around 3 to 6 people. Public communications, a single speaker addressing a group of people. Mass communication, there is minimal connection between the person or group sending the message and a large, sometimes anonymous group for whom the message is intended. Networks and social computing communication. Supports emerging communications trends of many-to-many which are supported by social computing technology and media. Possible communication artifacts and methods include notice boards, newsletters and in-house magazines and electronic magazines, letters to staff or volunteers, press releases, annual reports, emails and intranets, web portals and other information repositories for pull communication, phone conversations, presentations, team briefings, group meetings, focus groups, face-to-face formal or informal meetings between various stakeholders, communication groups or staff forums, and social computing technology and media. Tools and techniques number 6, interpersonal and team skills. The skills that can be used in this process include communication styles assessment. Please note this is not an assessment of the presenter. It is used to identify the stakeholders' preferred communication method, format and content for planned communication activities. Often used to diagnose unsupportive stakeholders, this assessment may follow a stakeholder engagement assessment to identify gaps in stakeholder engagement that require additional tailored communication activities and artifacts. For example, some people learn better by hearing, some by seeing, some actually have to get involved with doing things before they understand them, and you have to be able to understand and meet those needs. The next one is political awareness. Political awareness helps a project manager to plan communications based on the project environment as well as the organisation's political environment. Political awareness concerns the recognition of power relationships, both formal and informal, and also the willingness to operate within these structures. An understanding of the strategies of the organisation, knowing who wields power and influence in this arena, and developing an ability to communicate with these stakeholders are all aspects of political awareness. Cultural awareness. This is an understanding of the differences between individuals, groups and organisations and adapting the project's communication strategy to the context of these differences. This awareness and any consequent actions minimise misunderstandings and miscommunication that may result from cultural differences within the project's stakeholder community. Cultural awareness and cultural sensitivity help the project manager to plan communications based on cultural differences and requirements of stakeholders and team members. It's worthwhile when dealing with people from varying cultural backgrounds to have a basic understanding of the main religions that you're likely to encounter, such as baseball, soccer, football, basketball and hockey. Tools and techniques number 7, data representation. A representation technique that can be used for this process is a stakeholder engagement assessment matrix. The stakeholder engagement assessment matrix is shown in figure 13.6. This displays gaps between current and desired engagement levels of individual stakeholders. It can be further analysed in this process to identify additional communication requirements beyond the regular reports as a method to close any engagement level gaps. In this diagram, C equals the stakeholder's current level of engagement and D is the desired level of stakeholder engagement. Unaware is the lowest level and leading is the highest. And generally we're trying to move stakeholders up to the higher levels of engagement, which in this diagram means moving them from left to right. For stakeholder 1, their current level is unaware and we desire them to be at the level supportive. Stakeholder 3 is already at the desired level. My tip for these charts is to not use people's names or initials or roles, because if they get to see this chart and they see themselves flagged as unaware or resistant, then they will quickly move to the undesirable level of aggressive. Tools and techniques number 8, meetings. Project meetings will include virtually face-to-face and can be supported with document collaboration technologies including email messages and project websites. The planned communications management process requires discussion with the project team to determine the most appropriate way to update and communicate project information and to respond to requests from various stakeholders for information. Planned communications management, we've finally arrived at the outputs. Output number 1, communication management plan. The Communication Management Plan is a component of the Project Management Plan. It describes how project communications will be planned, structured, implemented and monitored for effectiveness. The plan contains the following information: stakeholder communication requirements, information to be communicated including language, format, content and level of detail, escalation processes, reason for the distribution of the information, time frame and frequency for the distribution of required information and receipt or acknowledgement of the response if applicable, person responsible for communicating the information, person responsible for authorising release of confidential information, person or groups who will receive the information including information about their needs, requirements and expectations, methods or technologies used to convey the information such as memos, email, press releases or social media, resources allocated for communicating activities including time and budget, method for updating and refining the communication management plan as the project progresses and develops, such as when the stakeholder community changes as the project moves through different phases. And I'll just mention again, you probably realise that PMBOK uses phases for two different meanings. This type of phase means really like a stage of the project, not the other type of phase which is a mini project. Glossary of common terminology, flowcharts of the information flow into the project, workflows with possible sequence of authorization, lists of reports, meetings, plans, etc. and constraints derived from specific legislation or regulations, technology, organisational policies, etc. The Communication Management Plan can include guidelines and templates for project status meetings, project team meetings, e-meetings and email messages. The use of a project website and project management software can be included if these are also used on the project. Output number 2, Project Management Plan updates. Any change to the Project Management Plan goes through the organisation's change control process via a change request. I'm sure you've heard me say that a couple of times before. The components that may require a change request from the Project Management Plan is the Stakeholder Engagement Plan to reflect any processes, procedures, tools or techniques that affect the engagement of stakeholders in project decisions or execution. Output number 3, Project Document Updates. The documents that may be updated as a result of carrying out this process include the project schedule. The project schedule may be updated to reflect communication activities. Stakeholder register may be updated to reflect communications planned. That brings us to the end of the Plan Communications Management. The next lesson is 10.2, Manage Communications. Please read the corresponding chapter in the PMBOK guide before watching the video, and seriously, I really mean read the PMBOK guide before you watch the video. You will get more out of watching the video if you do that.